Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to today's live stream. My name is Jody Williams, and I am the Indigenous Education Coordinator here at Dufferin-Peel District Catholic School Board. And I'm really excited to have with us Peter Schuler, who will formally introduce himself and have a really important conversation with everyone who's listening. Certainly with the news coming out this week, there's a lot of sadness that's going on, and it's important that we talk about it as well. But today we're also going to focus on really understanding who are the Anishinaabek, because Canada is not the only one here. There are other nations that have always existed here and still exist today. And during this month of June, we're going to continue having these conversations and really understand what does that actually mean, and how does it impact all of us, and what is our call to action for that. So, and the other piece around that is also the connection between colonialism and climate change and what we can all do about that. So I'm going to turn it over to Pete, who's going to introduce himself and share with us today.
Bonjour, je suis bien Indigo, Mashikando Dem, Mississaugas, Ojibwe, Anishinaabe, and New Credit Minimum Six Nations and Donjiba. And Donjibem Bangietigo. In my tiny little bit of language that I have, I gave you my name, which is on the screen someplace, which is my real name, and my other name, Peter Schuler, is my taxpayer name, I call it. And I'm a member of the Mississaugas of the Credit, and I'm Ojibwe, and I live on the Six Nations Reserve with the boss, who is my wife. And I'm glad that there are students, hopefully, listening. I can't see you, but I'm sure somebody's out there besides Jody. And I was fortunate, I don't know, fortunate, I guess that's the word, enough to be asked to work with a professor at the University of Waterloo, I think 7 years ago. And Professor Dan McCarthy asked me to help him teach a course about the environment. And when he asked me this, I laughed at him. I said, that's the funniest damn thing I ever heard. Pardon my French. I said, you want me, a high school dropout, well, actually not really a dropout, I got booted out, to go and teach university students, and I don't even have a grade 10 education. I said, that's the funniest thing I ever heard. And he's one of those kind of persistent guys, and he kept on bugging me until I said, okay, I'll try it. And so for the past 7 years, I've been working with him to do that introduction to Indigenous Environmental Knowledge. And when we talk about credentials, in the academic world, you have your CV, whatever that is, and it has a whole bunch of things behind it. Maybe you get letters behind your name, you have a doctor in this or a master's in that or whatever. And when we think about that, you have to get all this academic and education in order to teach others. And when I look at myself, I attended a different kind of a university, and that was a ceremonial place. And I learned from elders, knowledge keepers. I learned from old people, and some not so old, who had a lot of knowledge about our view of the Indigenous view of the rest of creation. And so when I'm asked to talk about things, I always wonder, where do I start? And when I ask myself that question, I always go back to the creation story, our creation story. And in that creation story, it starts in the beginning, before the beginning. There was only darkness, silence, stillness, and cold. And the creator herself, himself, becomes aware and wonders what's out there in that darkness. And then the creator sends out a thought, and the thought creates a sound. But that thought just keeps on going. And then the creator calls back that thought. And when the thought is called back, it creates light. And so now we have silence, we have sound, we have cold, and from the light we have heat. And in our creation story, in the fourth part of creation story, the creation story, everything is set into movement. And I have a book someplace. Oh, I think I put it away in another bookcase. But anyway, it was a book written in 1939. And in that book, it says that the indigenous people of North America knew nothing of the environment, that they didn't know where things came from, that they didn't understand how things worked, and that we worshipped animals, and we were in awe of all these things. And that was written, I believe, in 1939. And that's the very beginning of this book. And this book is about indigenous people. And that was published in the United States. And that is one of the biggest lies ever told. Because we knew about these things, probably much more knowledge than the people who came here. And when the people came to this part of the world, they brought with them a different set of knowledge and a different way of looking at things. And they considered themselves to be the boss. They considered that they had the God-given right to do whatever they wanted to the rest of creation, that they could take as much as they wanted, and that they were in power to do whatever they wanted. And so when we look at our belief system and the way we look at things, we believe that everything has a spirit, that we were placed here on this part of the earth. And when I was growing up, I had none of this knowledge that I carry now. I was raised going to church. And when I was 21, I stopped going. And I went to a Protestant church. And I even used to teach Sunday school. And I went to that minister and I said, this is the last Sunday I'm going to come here. And he was a very nice man. And he said, why? Why aren't you coming back? And I told him, I said, I can't accept this. And if I keep coming here, then I'm just a hypocrite. And so he said, what are you going to do now? And I said, well, I'm going to go and try and find out how my ancestors looked at the world. And how did they live here for all this time without destroying the earth? And so, of course, you set out to do these things, and it's really easy to get blown off your track. And so when you go look for spirit, sometimes you go look in the wrong places. And so, you know, for a while I looked in those bottles that carry spirits. And, you know, I didn't take my spiritual quest too seriously because I was too busy chasing those other spirits. But eventually I found what I was looking for, and I began to try to learn these ways. And so we have what we call the seven grandfather teachings. And these seven grandfather teachings are really simple. And the first one that I'm going to talk about is the truth. And so when we look at the environment, we have to try and find out what's the truth about the environment. Are we really on top? Are we really the boss? Or are we just woven into the garden blanket of creation? And that's where we're supposed to be. And when I started looking at my ancestors, I came to believe that they were indeed woven into the blanket of creation. And that's how they lived. They didn't place themselves on top. They considered themselves to be a part of creation, not the boss of creation. And so we have a lot of things that we would do to honor the rest of creation. And one of these things that we would do is to offer something if we wanted to take something from creation. And in our case, which is not the case of all across Turtle Island, we use tobacco. And we took that little bit of tobacco when I went fishing or hunting or gathering medicines, and we would make an offering of tobacco to the plants or the animals that we were going to ask to support us. And you heard me say ask. We didn't demand it. We asked. And so that part of it, when I talk to the students at the university, I tell them, you know, before Europeans got here, we had this store. And in this store, there was everything that you needed to live. There was medicine. There was vehicles to transport yourself. There was food, clothes, shelter, tools. It was a great big Swiss Army knife type store where you could get anything out of it that you needed. Everything that you needed was in that store. And the best part about that store is you did not have to have any money to access that store. But the thing you have to understand about that store, it was like a giant IKEA, because everything in that store had to be assembled. So if you wanted moccasins, for instance, shoes, then you had to go hunt a moose. And you had to ask that moose to give itself up. And when that moose gave itself up, you use every part of that moose. You use its hide for moccasins, maybe for clothing. You used his bones for tools. You ate all his flesh. And you might leave a piece of that moose behind hanging in a tree someplace to honor that moose so that his spirit would have a place. And in this store, there was medicine. And they say that all the medicines are there for everything that ails us. And some of these medicines are plants. Some of them are animals. And some of that medicine is just a kind human being. And so this is how we understood the rest of creation, the environment. This was our truth. And so that next grandfather teaching is honesty. And so people always say, well, what's the difference between truth and honesty? I'm sharing with you the truth as we know it. And if I wasn't honest, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't share it with you. Because you can have the truth and not share it. Therefore, you're not being honest. You're hiding it. You're carrying something, but you're not giving it out. And one thing that's important in this is that you have to be honest with yourself. You can know the truth, but if you're not honest with yourself, you're not going to act on it. We know the truth that we are in a time of climate change. And we know the truth that human beings have caused this. And we know the truth that by overconsumption, we are destroying the other beings on this planet. And one of the things I asked the students at that university is, when you fill up your car full of gas in the summertime, how many times do you have to scrub the bugs off the windshield? And a lot of them say never. But I'm going to tell you the truth here. When I was a kid, in the summertime, almost every time you filled up your car full of gas, you had to take one of those little scrubber sponges and work your arm there and get all the bugs off your windshield. So let's be honest about that. What does that mean? All the bugs didn't suddenly find a better place to live. They're not all stuck on a tree someplace. Although this morning or last night when I came in the house, it looked like somebody spilled a whole bunch of coffee out on the step outside. Maybe a whole half of a coffee can, it looked like, spread out over the sidewalk. Those were ants, those little tiny ants. And every year about this time, I see that happen where they all come up and they're all just a big mass of them. And I'm happy to see that. I don't go try to poison them. I don't go over and step on them. I say, bonjour, hello. Anishinaabek, what are you doing today? Because I like to know. Because we all have a purpose, whether we're a human, whether we're an animal, whether we're an insect or a bird, we all have a purpose here. And so when we don't have to scrub those bugs off our windshield, what does that mean? It means that we are destroying them. And remember, I said everything has a purpose, everything has a job to do. So those insects pollinate plants. They also bite you and sting you and all that kind of stuff. But they pollinate plants. And the plants provide us with food. We believe that everything is connected. So that it's like a chain. If you take one link out of the chain, it affects the rest of the chain. The chain is now separate. And so half of that chain, if you're pulling along, half of that chain is going to stop. And you're going to keep on going with part of a chain. And eventually, if you keep cutting pieces out of it, there's only going to be one link left in the chain. And that's you. And then you are going to disappear because you won't have anything to eat. You have destroyed all the rest of the chain and you're the one left. And that's where we sit today. And so the next grandfather teaching is courage. So we all kind of know what's going on. We're over consuming. We're doing all this. We're using all kinds of plastic. We're doing all kinds of things. And so you can say, well, I'm only one human being. I can't really change anything. I can't myself, my little self, can't do anything. You remember those coffee grounds I heard that I talked about earlier that were all spread over the sidewalk yesterday? Those little ants. They're way smaller than me. They were like the tiny little ants, like this big. And if you counted them, there was probably at least 1,000 of them there. And I know one thing about ants. They all work together. And as small as they are, they move all kinds of earth to make an anthill. They build their colony below the ground. Carpenter ants can chew up trees. Not live, healthy trees, but when a tree starts to rot, they go in there and they start chewing up that tree. So if that little insect, that small, can take the inside out of a tree or move hundreds of pounds of earth, I don't think it's fair for me to say I can't do anything. I don't think it's fair that you say you can't do anything either. And so you have to find the courage to do something. And maybe that courage is you wear your shoes until they wear out. That you still carry iPhone 5 or 6 here. You don't rush out and buy something just because it's new. We used to sew patches on our pants when we got holes in them. We used to fix things and make them last. I remember the old people that I knew. The kitchen table that they had was the kitchen table that they acquired when they got married. And there they were, 60, 70 years old, still sitting around the same kitchen table. They didn't just go buy a new one because that one was out of style. They had the same rocking chair that their grandmother had or their grandfather had. They didn't rush out and buy a new, whatever that lazy boy, because there was a new color out. These are simple things. But it takes courage to do that because your friends are going to say, what's wrong with you? They're going to make fun of you because you're not up with whatever it is. Joneses, I think. You're not keeping up. And I always ask myself, everyone wants to keep up with the Joneses, but nobody asks where the Joneses are going. I don't try to keep up with them because I believe they're going to hell in a handbasket. They're just working their butts off to go nowhere. I look at those kind of things and I think about my ancestors and how they live. One part about that store that was really important was that you only took out of that store what you needed. And if you got really lucky and you had a really strong bow and you shot your arrow and it went through 4 deer and 4 deer died, you shared that with everyone else. As a matter of fact, when you shot 1 deer, you shared it with everyone else. Everyone looked after each other. And today, we have this thing that you guys are taught is to be an individual. You have individual rights, you have individual freedoms, you have individual this and individual that. we didn't have land ownership. One time I was talking to a grade, I think it was a grade 5 or 6 class. And this one little guy, he says, so how come you guys gave up your land? And I said, well, I have to do something first before I can answer that. And I had my drum bag there, and I stuck my hand in my drum bag and I rattled it around for a while. And I said, okay, now I said, I fixed it. So now I can do something. I said, what I fixed was that I own all the air in this room, and all you kids got to give me 25 cents in order to breathe that air. What do you think about that? And some of them said, that's not fair. And the other one said, you can't do that. And eventually someone says, you can't own the air. And I said, now, there is the answer that that young man was looking for. Because we believed that you cannot own the land any more than you can own the air, any more than you can own water. You cannot really own anything. The only thing that you own is your own body. That's all you got. And when you die, your body goes in the ground and your spirit goes back to where it came from. So now you don't even own the body. And so we believe that, you know, we're only here and we're only part of that earth. We don't own it, we're part of it. We're woven into that blanket of creation. And so when you're part of something, like, you're not going to go along and cut your finger off just because you feel like it. So why would you go and destroy the things that you're part of, which is the rest of creation, the earth? Why would you do that? Doesn't make any sense. So the next one of the 7 grandfather teachings is humility. And humility tells us that we're not the boss. It tells us that we're just part of creation, that we are part of it, that we are part of a puzzle. And in our creation story, it says that all the rest of creation, all the animals, birds, fish, everything, they were here before man was put here. And so when you look at that, if man was to disappear, the rest of creation will just keep on going. But if the rest of creation disappears, you're going to follow that. You're going to disappear. And so having the humility to be humble enough to recognize where you fit and how important you aren't is part of how we were able to live here without destroying the rest of creation. And the next one on that list is respect. When you're humble, you can respect the rest of creation. And a lot of people get respect confused with fear. They demand that you know, like, you might have a teacher who is overbearing and says, I demand respect. You don't demand anything. You earn it. You can earn respect, but you can't demand it. You can't get it by fear. If you get it by fear, all you're getting is fear. You're not getting respect. And so when you respect things, I have a big toolbox out back there, and I keep the tarps for my sweat lodge in there. And almost every year, there will be some wasps come along and they'll make their nest inside that toolbox. And they usually make it right by the latch. And so I might go out there and open the lid, and there will be some wasps in there. Anishinaabek, what are you doing today?
Sorry, it looks like there's a little bit of interruption with the signal. If you just stand by, hopefully it will resolve. And it looks like we have lost Pete. So let's see. He may rejoin. Sometimes that happens. It gets kicked out and then you come back and rejoin. So hopefully, based on what Peter has been sharing with us today. Oh, he's back. We'll continue on with him. Okay. I was trying to do a little interlude for you.
Where did I get cut off at?
Oh my goodness. It stopped about 30 seconds after you were cut off for about 30 seconds. So
okay.
Yeah, not too far.
So anyway, I was talking about those wasps. And one day when I opened that lid, when I addressed those wasps, one of them flew out and landed on my shirt right here. Then it walked around for a little while and it flew back into that nest and stayed there. And by the end of the summer, there was like 20 wasps in there, and I never ever got stung. And I always asked if there was anybody around when I was doing that work. I would ask them to come and look, and I would tell them, don't get afraid of what you're going to see in here, and don't wave your arms around, don't jump up and down, don't holler, just look. And I said, inside here, there's going to be some wasps, and they're not going to sting you, and I'm going to talk to them. And I did that because, you know, we are afraid of those wasps and bees and things because they sting, or they can sting. And that fear is not respect. Respect is going there and talking to them and not killing them, allowing them to have their space. And you know, every once in a while I get stung. I might grab a board or something, might be a bee on there, and I don't see it and it stings me. And I'm not allergic to those kind of things yet, of course, but I look at that as I just got a shot of medicine. Because you don't know what's in that venom, how it might affect your whole system. And recently I read that they were looking at honeybee venom to treat some forms of breast cancer. You know, so we look at all these other beings besides us and we respect them. Even snakes. Some people are afraid of snakes. I had a big garter snake come and live by the back door last summer. I called him all neck because I couldn't find his shoulders. And you know, that snake, one day I was going to go outside and I almost stepped on him. He was about, I would say, a bit more than 3 feet long. It was kind of chunky for a garter snake and kind of big for a garter snake. But I honored him because I know he's looking after the plants. He's going to eat insects, might even eat a mouse or two. And he has a job to do, and he has his own place. And so the next one of those grandfather teachings is love. And you know, it takes a while to understand what is love. And it's not that crush on that cute guy or girl you got. That's a crush on that cute guy or girl. Love is something a bit different. And so, you know, when I first met my wife, I thought, boy, that beautiful woman, that's the one I want. That's the one for me. And, you know, back then I didn't have gray hair and I had more of it. What I had here is that some of it's blown off. That's what happens when you run too fast. You know, your hair starts to blow off the front. So anyway, I had that nice dark hair. And we were both quite a few pounds thinner. And, you know, over the years, it's hard to live with somebody, especially if that somebody is me, because I'm not always the happiest, go luckiest person around. And, you know, you get to know someone really well after you've been with them for a few decades. And you get to know all their warts, freckles, and bumps and bad habits, etc. And when you get past all of that stuff, what's left is love. You you know what that person's going to do. Well, you should anyway. That's what my wife tells me. I should know what she wants. Of course, I never do because she's always playing tricks on me. But you know, that's love. And so we should also love the rest of creation. When I go outside, I hear the birds. And I really like to feed the birds and watch them and listen to them. And I try to learn what each bird sounds like so that you don't have to see it to know it's there. And I also have chipmunks and a couple different kinds of squirrels that go with that bird feeder. And, you know, I allow them. I'm not going to say, hey, that's just bird food. Because I like watching those guys too. And they even get in my garage and make a mess sometimes. And, you know, you could say, I hate that. You could go after them and poison them or shoot them or whatever. But I believe that they all have something to do. And so those squirrels, they plant walnut trees. I have a black walnut tree outside. Those squirrels gather up those nuts, they bury them, they forget where they are sometimes, and you know, over the summer, all these walnut trees start popping up. And so we can go and transplant them wherever we want. And that's part of what those squirrels do. And I have another piece of property, and there's a lot of hickory trees there, and there's an open field. And so now I see all these little hickory trees starting to grow, you know, and they're a long ways away from the tree itself, the parent tree. And so I know that the squirrels are taking those nuts and burying and planting those trees. And I also have about 20 acres of just grass. And there's all kinds of wildflowers there. There's milkweed there. And so yesterday I was up there and I see this butterfly floating along there. And then I see it land, and it landed on a milkweed plant. And so that was a monarch butterfly. And I know monarch butterflies and all insects are in danger. And so I've had people want to rent that land and farm it. And I refuse to do that because even though I could use the money, I would rather see the insects and the birds take up that space. I would rather watch those butterflies floating along through the air than see a few dollars come in my bank account. And that's because I love the rest of creation. which is kind of hard to imagine, but you can love a tree. You can love a frog. And you can even love a big, ugly snapping turtle. And that's important to have all of that. And so the last of these grandfather teachings is wisdom. And the wisdom is to know all the rest. But it's also to know that those 7 grandfather teachings aren't just to be applied to human beings. And that's one of the things when I've been asked to do a land acknowledgement, that when we're asked to acknowledge who was here first, everyone always says, you know, it was the Anishinaabek, the Ongahome, it was the Lakota, the Tlingit, all the peoples across Turtle Island. But I always start with the other ones, the other nations that were here first. The Mitikok Nation, the Gigonsuck Nation. And I name off all these nations and people say, I never heard of those ones before. And those other nations, the Mitikok nations, are all the trees. The Gigonsuck are all the fish. The Manitoba Nation is all the insects. And so that's how our people looked at the rest of creation. And that natural law that we had was that we are part of creation. That you cannot just go willy-nilly and destroy everything. That everything is connected. And that you have to respect the rest of creation or you will destroy yourself along with the rest of creation. Like every time we go and we have a species that goes extinct, it's like chopping off one of our own fingers. And we have so many species going extinct now that I'm pretty sure we don't have any fingers or toes left. And that happens every day. On that open grassland I have there, last summer I saw a bobolink. And that's the first one I've seen for probably 30 years. And I was really happy when I heard that bird, because when you scare it, it flies straight up in the air and it makes its sound as it goes up, and then it will fly away someplace. And you know, I was really happy when I saw that bird. And I also saw a meadowlark, which I haven't seen for a long time either. And I saw a black-billed cuckoo last summer too. And those, they're here, but you hardly ever see them. They like to hide in the brush. And, you know, people will tell you, oh, well, I didn't know we had cuckoos. That's pretty hard to believe that you didn't know we had cuckoos. All you got to do is watch Parliament, and you know, we have a building full of cuckoos. And, you know, they're making environmental laws that say we can destroy whatever we want. Those are the real cuckoos. That we can drill for oil, that we can do fracking, all that kind of stuff that destroys the water. And think about that, Nibi, that's our word for water. We even believe the water has spirit. Nibi Manado, the spirit of the water. Minweyweygaan, the center of the lake woman. These are all entities that we look at. And we have a relationship with those entities. You know, and you go around the world, Indigenous peoples all around the world have a very similar belief systems. There is a man in Australia, his name is Tyson Yunkaporta, who's an Aboriginal man from Australia, and he wrote a book called Sand Talk. And so I read that book. And I noticed that a lot of what he shared is similar to our Ojibwe belief system. And one of the things that he said, if I can remember how to say it, he said that metaphors are a way that our ancestors speak to us. I don't know if that's exactly how he said it, but we have a word called atsokan, which can be a sacred story, but it can also be the spirit that gives you ideas or inspiration. It can give you metaphors. And when I read that, what he wrote there, I thought to myself, that's how I understand things. These metaphors pop into my head. And people will say, well, that's a good way of explaining that. Well, all I'm doing is repeating how it was explained to me by the Atsokanic, or Tanako Chipichikanik, my ancestors. And, like my name that appears on their screen there, Ojibwe, rough translation means writing man. And when I was younger, I used to think I could write, but I think now I just take dictation. That you have these thoughts come to you, or these words, and some of these things that and words that have come to me, it's hard to explain because I didn't sit down to write them. I sat down and wrote one word, all the rest just fell out. It's like somebody's telling you what to write. It's not something you have to work at. It's just something that pops there, and it's like the doors open and out comes this stuff. And it's not something you always ask for, because sometimes what comes out is pretty hard. It's pretty, I don't know how you want to say it, but so I don't claim to write anything anymore. I just say I take dictation. And so when Jody asked me to talk today, I do what I do every morning. I go and I light a little fire. I take some tobacco. I give thanks for the rest of creation. Try to mention everything that I can think of. I try to use as much language as I can. And I always end with Naramawashin. Minweyweygaan Anishinaabek. I say, help me tell stories, help me write, to help the rest of creation and our people. And I do that pretty much every day. And I've been doing that for quite a while. And in that process, if I know someone who's sick, I offer prayers for that person. Or if I know someone who's having a hard time, I do that too. And I do that because not only are we all connected to the rest of creation, we are all connected to each other. You cannot move something without affecting something else. And the effect might not be right away. It might be 20 years down the road. It might be 50 years down the road. It might be 100 years down the road. It might even be 1,000 years. But my ancestors understood that. All the stories and things that get dismissed as myths are part of my ancestors' knowledge. It's part of knowing because you've been here forever. It's part of being part of the rest of creation, not sitting on top. When you sit on top, go sit on your kitchen table and tell me what's underneath of it. Tell me what's going on under there. Go sit in a building and tell me what's happening in the sky. You can't do it. You have to be in creation. You have to be part of it. And when you separate yourself from the rest of creation, you begin to be able to destroy it. Because you don't feel that you're destroying part of yourself. And my ancestors knew this. That's why when the people came from across the ocean, we resisted what they were trying to make us do. That's why we still resist. That's why we still stand up and protest when there's somebody going to do something that's going to pollute the water. And we're not doing it just for ourselves. We're doing it for everyone, including the rest of creation. And, you know, I look at the way things are and the environment, climate change, and all those things. And I've been looking at that for a long, long time because I worked outside almost all my life and I saw the changes. I saw when the winters got less snow, when they were warmer. I saw insects and birds disappear. I saw land get gobbled up by houses, by roads. My dad saw the same thing too. He told me about that. And in the fight to make us accept what was brought here, to make us change our perception of the rest of creation, they took away our language. And Ojibwe Bangietago, I only speak just a little. But within our languages, all the concepts I just talked about. There are words in our language that give you a different view of the rest of creation. And one of my favorite examples is Manadonsak, which if you look at the English Ojibwe dictionary, will say that means insects. But that's not what it means. What it really means is little spirits. And so when you have a little spirit, this little being, it makes you look at things differently. When you say insect in English, you know, a lot of times our mind goes towards pests or vermin. We think about advertisements for Abel Waco and Raid. We think about those wasp killing bombs you can get that squirt juice, poison 15, 20 feet to get rid of something that's not even bothering you. To get rid of something that's doing a job that is probably benefiting you. And we've been taught to be afraid of those things because we are on top. And I say it's time to get off the top of the table and join the rest of creation. Go out and walk around and see what's going on. Learn all the different trees you can. Learn to identify birds. Learn to identify insects. Try to find out what they do. Where are they connected to you? And to take those 7 grandfather teachings and apply them to the rest of creation. Because that's what my ancestors did. And we lived here for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. And we did not destroy the place. We had highways that were used constantly. But the vehicles left no tracks. They left no fumes. And when the vehicles were done being used, they went back to the earth. They disappeared. And those highways were the lakes and the rivers. And the vehicles were canoes. And we cannot go back and live in teepees. We cannot go back and live in wigwams. We cannot go back and live off the land. That time has passed. We can't do that anymore because we destroyed so much that it's not possible anymore to do that, but not at least not around here. However, we can go back and learn those things, those ideas, concepts, and ways of being that allowed my ancestors to live here for thousands of years without destroying the place. And we can use those concepts to design the world ahead of us. We can bring those ideas and ways of being to the present. And that, I believe, is how we're going to survive all this stuff. I think it was Albert Einstein who said that doing the same things over and over again and expecting a different result is the definition of insanity. That you got to be crazy to think that if you do the same things over and over, the same way, it's going to produce a different result. When I think about that, all the ways that we're brought here have contributed to the destruction of the environment that bring us to today. And so all the scientists are starting to use that same knowledge to change the result. They're doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different answer. Which is why I say we need to go on and collect indigenous knowledge and bring that forward and apply it to today. Those concepts that allowed us to live without destroying the rest of creation, we need to bring those forward. To use that knowledge that my ancestors had to try to fix the problems that we've created. And I say we, because we're on this boat together. And in case you haven't noticed, the boat is sinking. So I think we need to learn how to plug the hole and or learn how to swim. And, you know, you got to think about those ants. Those ants work collectively. Bees work collectively. And they all work together and they accomplish the impossible. And human beings have to do the same thing. You know, if you quit using plastic bags, if you wear your shoes until, you know, they wear out, if you don't go buy new stuff every day because you don't like the color anymore, those are all small changes. But if everyone did that, there would be a sea of change. When you go look at a lake, imagine that that lake is not just that body of water, but it's billions and billions of raindrops. That's what created that lake. And so we have billions of people on the earth. If billions of people change just a little bit, that creates a sea of change. And so I say to myself, you know, I'm 74 years old. I'm getting closer to the exit door every day. But I hope I live to be 100, not because I'm greedy, because I want to know what's going to happen. I want to see what's going to happen. I'm curious. And you should always be curious. You should always try to learn something. You should always be poking around, trying to figure out what does that ant do. Not the one that's married to your uncle, the other one, the one with 6 legs. Try to find out those kind of things. Where do you fit? And how can you make change? How can you apply those 7 grandfather teachings to the rest of creation? Because what you've been taught isn't working. What we've been doing isn't working. And so we need to make some change. And don't feel depressed. Don't feel that you can't do anything, because you can. All you gotta do is look at the ants. Look at all those little beings that do so much. If you ever watch a beaver cut down a tree, he doesn't have a chainsaw. He's got teeth. But he can cut down a tree that's 10 inches in diameter, and he can chew that whole thing up. You know, I have a chainsaw. I have a hard time cutting a tree down. And that beaver, he can build a dam, hold back water. I can't even plug my nose. I can't do all those things that those animals do. But I can learn from them. And that's what my ancestors did. They learned by watching the rest of creation. You know, I wish I could get all you guys out in the bush and show you, teach you not to be afraid of insects. You know, when a wasp or a bee comes in my house, I try to get it to walk onto my hand and I carry it outside. They won't hurt you. I never got stung doing that. And if they won't walk on your hand because they recognize you as a human, take a piece of paper. They'll walk onto that paper and you can carry them outside. You don't have to squash them. You don't have to be afraid of them. You just have to respect them and love them. Have the humility to do that. And that's the truth. And if you're honest with yourself, you can do that. So I don't know how much time we got here, Jody.
We are at the end of our time. So if you want to if you have any closing words.
Okay. Thank you for listening. I flap my gums quite often. And, you know, I wish I could be there in person with you, that I could answer questions if you got questions. But these are the times we're in right now. And I know that all you young people are having a hard time with this COVID business. And I encourage you, if you have an opportunity, go outside. And if you got a park near you, go watch those things I talked about. Because, you know, our spirits get lonely. And all the rest of creation, the trees, the birds, they all have spirit. And when you open yourself up to interacting with all those things, your spirit will react. It does something to you. I can't describe what it is, but all you have to do is go sit in the bush for a while and listen to the birds. You know, watch the insects. Try to figure out what they're doing. Look at all the different plants. And it changes you. It changes you for the better. And I really, you know, like myself, this isolation business hasn't really bothered me that much because I'm not really a social butterfly. And this reminds me of how I grew up, how we didn't just rush to town and do this, so how we didn't have new shoes every third week or all those kind of things. We just lived simply. And I think, you know, having the courage to do what you think is right is important. And those 7 grandfather teachings, they're important to understand them. And they're simple, but it takes you a lifetime to really understand them. And so I'm glad that I was able to talk to you. Maybe you're not so glad, but I'm glad that I was able to talk to you, and I hope you learned something. And hope that something I said will help you out. And so, Gigawaba Minminawa. That means I will see you again sometime. We don't say goodbye. Even when someone passes away, we always say, we'll see you again. So, Gigawaba Minminawa. Chimegwich Bizintawig. Thank you for listening.
Well, Chimegwich Pete for sharing with us today. And really, I hope everyone who is watching really thinks about all of our roles and responsibilities to the land and with each other, and to really start to listen to Indigenous peoples and to let them be the ones to lead in this new movement forward together. So I hope everyone has a good rest of their day, stay safe, and we'll see you on the next one.